The film was once again a gesture of counter-narrative and a way to not let this restitution be instrumentalized by the politics, neither on the French side, neither on the African side. And I could not separate the subject of restitution to the youth, to the African youth. For me, it's an absurdity to even separate these two subjects. I felt the silence of this African youth about that subject was very problematic. I would hear very, very old school debate in France between white, old conservators wondering if Africa was ready to have their artifacts back, or very, very colonial and condescendent and paternalist conversations. I would read some very elevated mind texts about intellectuals, but there was no objects that could turn this subject of restitution from the spheres of the politics, from the spheres of the academic world, down the ground to the people. And I basically create this film for two communities to have the first row, the first front place, the artifacts themselves, which are, to my opinion, the center of the conversation. And so I've needed to really have them at the center, like actresses, like heroines of their own story, to make them, to have them able to talk about their own return, and to have also a certain Beninese youth engage with this subject, reappropriate themselves this debate, and be heard, and be liberate, and have a speech liberate. So this is the reason why I made this film. I never put my feet in Benin before this film, so I was not an expert on the restitution subject. I had never been to Benin, but as a French-Senegalese filmmaker, I felt completely at my place to be carrying this journey, this gesture. And so when I arrived in Benin, I investigated to see if I felt that to question, to meet, to investigate within a campus, a university, was quite right, because I also could have asked people in the streets, but you know, in the streets there is this, I'm not so interested by this very frontal camera, to go in the streets, ask people, film them, what they think about restitution. I know, I thought it was a bit demagogic, because obviously they have other things to think. You know, if they are in the streets, struggling, working, they don't care about restitution. You know, they don't even know it's happening. So let's not pretend they give a, you know. And which I'm not so in line with this truth documentary, which I found a little sometimes condescending. You know, let's go find truth in the streets. Yeah, I don't know. So I felt that a university was a place that maybe young people would be a little more sensitive to the topic, but I didn't know, and I investigate to see if a debate has been spontaneously spontaneously organized in the university. And there is a radio on the campus, and they had indeed, the day of the repatriation, they had indeed a little show talking about it, but it was not a special one amongst others. So because it did not happen, because nothing specific was organized within the university, I decided to create one myself. And so during 1 month, with the collaboration and help of a young Beninese filmmaker called Gildas Adornou, who assisted me on this film, we together casted a number of students from various disciplines, history, political science, history of art, etc. And I kept meeting young people in order to see what were their relationship to restitution, to this repatriation. Did they care? Did they didn't care? What it was really representing for them. I had very specific questions, and I guess as a filmmaker, my strategy was to find profiles that had a very unexpected, singular point of view. They were not necessarily experts on the subject, but had something very unexpected point of view about it. Also, because of censorship in Benin, young people that were ready to assume, to assert a point of view being filmed. And so, almost like a musical, almost like an orchestra chief, I gathered different people, almost as different instruments, who would really take in charge, each one of them a note, and that together to find some way harmonia with very contrasted notes, you know? I come from music, so I have a very musical way to approach cinema. It's both very concrete, very rooted in ideas, but the approach is very, very central and musical. So I gathered around 10 of them around the table that had different points of views, and then the production took care of bringing the most students as possible in the Agora. And I shared the questions that were really obsessing me to Gilles. Just to give the audience a context, In My Room is a film I directed during lockdown, during the pandemic, where I listened for the first time audios that I recorded from my grandmother when she was still alive. And because it was lockdown, because it was, you know, a very, very strange temporality, because I was also thinking of all these people being locked down in very different social situations, it was the time for me to confront myself to this audio material, which was very strong as an experience, because, you know, pictures of somebody who is no longer here is something, but sound is another dimension. And I felt that to make a film, to give a form to these moments we were going through, to use the voice as my grandmother, as a woman who was locked down for a very long time because she was living on her own in a small apartment in Paris, was a window for me to process the idea of isolation and the idea of memory at a moment during lockdown when the texture of memory was so special, because I know and we all knew we were going through something completely life-changing, unique, almost like a rupture in history, but it was sure then a year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years later we would already be so amnesiac about it, which is the case, right? Who still really question the impact of that break today? I don't know, because it felt like since there was such a acceleration of history also. But concerning Dahomey, I think for me it was important also to give a voice, to give back a voice to these artifacts, was also obviously as a restitution act and gesture, was also a way to shift the imaginary in which these artifacts versus these ancestors have been certain folkloric and exotic image by the colonial gaze. And for me, to have the possibility to kill, to break the neck of these stereotypes as soon as I can, in Atlantics, my first feature, in the wedding ceremony scene, or by treating the artifacts, the ancestors the way I did in this film, is always a way to renew the imaginary around the ancestor. Because we have a very boring and very uninspiring way to picture our African ancestors. There are so many stereotypes that have ruined that this field. Ancestors are not locked in the past. Ancestors are not locked in the image of an old man with a white beard telling a tale around the fire camp. Ancestor is, to me, a force that is still ready to be c'est une force qui est prête to be convoked, and to be able to shift that very folkloric and absurd cliché. Cinema really gives me so many palettes and dimensions to recreate a new imaginary of it. Through sound, through words, through silence, through subjectivity. And I feel that it's an energy that I wanted to be able to, for the audience to feel more than to picture. I feel that there's many images that should be killed in order to become not images anymore, but a more impalpable dimension, something you feel from another place, that an image you stick, to something. And strangely, even though cinema is a visual medium, it's also a very strong sound medium, and I don't necessarily only produce images. It produce so many more than just 2D images. It produces frequency, it produces emotion, feeling, and memory too, by the way. So, and I kind of not hesitated, but I questioned myself quite a bit before putting words in the mouth of the artifacts, of the ancestors, because I felt that my first idea was to have them silent, to really, because in the editing, the first 15 minutes were silence. There was not the voice under the underground of the museum where the thousands and thousands and thousands of artifacts are locked down in the dark. So in prisons, and absent from the continent, and basically stocked in the caves of underground museums, which is an image that is very important, I think, for the world to get. I was not that much aware of this very precise image, which is kilometers of black undergrounds within Europe, with 500,000 of objects which represent the physical traces of a whole history of a continent, which is the oldest civilization on Earth. Locked down in the black, in the dark underground, which is, I think, an image, once again, this time I talk about an image that should really stick to the most people as possible, because I think it's something that can take a life to really be aware of. It's very conventional to think about this in the academia or in university for people who are making it everyday subject, but for most of the people, for most of us, it's something that you might completely don't know if it's also if it's not a subject that becomes a little more democratized and shared. This is why I thought it was important to make this film, because it's a subject that is very much confined in the academic world, or taken in hostage by politics when they need to refresh their images. And I felt it was no way that they would use that restitution to be for each president to renew their image. I thought it was our story too. And I love the fact that the debate doesn't give answers, but keep asking questions that opens the door to another question, that opens the door to another question. The idea was not to deliver any answer, but to really portray a moment of question, and also to deliver an idea of what debating should be to me, because we are witnessing here, everywhere, the mediocrity of debates, which is definitely a political intention to really devitalize the debate, to create debates on TV that are tricky, that are full of indecence, counter-truth. And I felt that it was very important in our time, which I shot the film in 21, during 2 years, that it was super important to renew, to stage a debate that was turning to utopia, like how should debates reinvent themselves. And the hugest lesson I received from Benin, and I think you also remarked it in the film, is the quality of listening I witnessed within the debates. I found most of the statements very strong, but they are also very strong because there is a very intense presence in listening. And you also become a great speaker when the person in front of you, which is the case. I don't know if I'm a good speaker, but you are. But you, and it's also what I've learned from Return. Yes, when it was almost destiny, I think, for me to meet this historical moment. I put this historical word in
quotation marks.
Yeah, because it needs to be questioned. For whom is it historical? Who decides that a moment is historical or not? Which is one of the questions I wanted the students to be wondering about. But I feel very fortunate as a filmmaker to have been able to make that film, because it felt pretty much aligned with the obsessions, the reflection that have been really haunting me since so many years, and which is why I finally make a film, is to give a form to things that I cannot stop questioning and thinking about. And I guess that if there is a word or a gesture that could embody my body of work as a filmmaker, I guess the return and the restitution is pretty much at the core of why I decided to engage in my cinema in Africa, and was particularly in Dakar, since 2008 to 2008. So, of course, it was important to make this film, to archive that moment, to document that moment, to propose a completely turning point and counter story to the official governmental narrative. but it was also for me a way to affirm a gesture of return, of reappropriation. And so the film is not only about return, but it's also coming from a place of return, and also of to decenter yourself from the perpetual European sense of universalism as an European Western center. For me, decenter myself from this Western legacy goes with going back and returning to my African legacy, which is definitely a political gesture. And this film seemed to embrace, like the Haitian woman says in the film, like through the return of these artifacts, it was also a way to embody my own return, which I've been processing since a while, and this new era that we are witnessing, where a lot of Afro-descendants people, so diasporic community are making this return. Doesn't mean they will leave France, leave Holland, leave UK, but I think there's really a shift going on for many reasons. For the experience of living in the Western world, and because you're non-white, to keep feeling in a way or another the idea that you're not exactly French, you're not exactly English, you're not exactly, well, actually, probably. Probably not, and this is actually a privilege.
To have
That's
multiple
only,
worlds.
yes.
At a certain point,
and instead of becoming a difficulty, a handicap, a problem, let's make it a privilege. And let's re-choose who we are, where we come from, and because we have the chance as Europeans to be able to travel all around the world, which is not the case for Africans who are impeached to move within the continent or abroad. Let's make our double identity a richness and a way also to create spaces for the one who cannot circulate in the world, a space of freedom also. Yes. Now decolonial is a word I tend to almost step back from because it's like feminism. It's in our hyper-capitalistic world, everything at some point is being rattrapé, it's being swallowed by capitalism as feminism. Anything would be swallowed and took back from capitalist system. And I think that decolonial should not become a word that's being used there and there and there and there. And then it devitilizes the sense of it because it's initially I wouldn't even use this word because I think it is definitely decolonial. But I think it was decolonial even before I would use that term. And yes, I completely think it's a tool of deconstruction, a tool, as far as I'm concerned, of emancipation as a filmmaker, as a woman, as a simple citizen, a tool that allowed me to really took over control on my own narrative, which once again, as a woman, as a mixed black woman, was something very important for me since a very young age to control the tool of my own narrative. Because as a woman, as a black woman, I found myself, I always find myself in a very tricky place of being an object of projection. This is also why I didn't really feel like becoming an actress in France in the early 20s, because I felt that I didn't want to be objectivized.